Vice Chair of the Center for American Security for America's First Policy Institute, Fred Fleitz. Fred, thanks for being with us. It seems like every day that goes by, every time we speak to you, the threat seems to loom a bit larger. Talk to us about where we are today, specifically with nuclear threats.
Good to be here. Well, the disappearance of monster submarines that carry monster nuclear missiles, that's a big deal. I think we have to take seriously Putin's threat of nuclear weapons. I think it's very unlikely this will happen, but I don't think it should be disregarded. I think that arming the Ukrainians to the teeth is the right way to go, but I also think we have to scale back the rhetoric a little bit. You know, H.R. McMaster said on Sunday, on one of the Sunday shows, that we may be looking at the collapse of the Russian army in Ukraine. That's going to be humiliating. And I would counsel Joe Biden to not make it more humiliating than it has to be, not to do, laps in the end zone that Russia's going to lose. Putin, I think, is going to have to accept a loss. That's what I'm hoping. And I don't think we should make it harder for him.
Well, the only way Russia is a superpower still is the fact that it has nuclear weapons, right?
That's right. I mean, it certainly doesn't have a superpower economy. It has an economy that's about equivalent to Italy. And you know, when we hear that Russia and China are going to be partnering against the United States, Russia's quite a junior partner to China, given its sad economic situation, the fact that its population is declining. The Russians are a convenient ally for the Chinese, but I don't think the Chinese plan on relying on them.
Do you think that Putin is ultimately on his way out? Is this sort of his denouement as the leader?
I think we need to talk about that. I mean, assuming that he continues to give orders that result in these military disasters, will there be a time that his generals try to overthrow him? I imagine that Putin is ready for that. But I don't think we should be talking publicly about regime change. We have to talk about de-escalating and not create a situation where Putin feels like he is in such a bind that he has to resort to tactical nuclear weapons.
So how do we get to that point? Any kind of compromise, Ukraine's not going to make it because they want that territory back that through sham elections Putin has taken. And then Putin wants to save face. So if he's able to annex parts of Ukraine, it looks like he had some success. How do you see this playing out? Because there doesn't seem to be an easy answer.
Well, we're not going to get there by Zelensky saying what he said the other day, that he'll only enter negotiations if Putin is not in charge of Russia and he wants to immediately be admitted to NATO. That's throwing gasoline on the fire. I think there should be active efforts to hold peace talks, even though both parties aren't ready for them. I think that the U.S. and its European allies should be aggressively pushing this to try to schedule things in Geneva or Vienna. Hopefully the parties will show up. I don't know how successful this will be or when it will happen, but there's just not enough talk by the Biden administration on finding an off-ramp, finding a way to end this conflict.
Fred, I want to get your thoughts on this. According to the Japanese Ministry of Defense, early this morning, North Korea fired a ballistic missile over Japan. South Korea and the U.S. conducted a joint strike package flight and precision bombing drill in response to that ballistic missile test. What's your take on what North Korea is doing?
It's a huge provocation. North Koreans have tested 44 missiles in 2022, the largest in 1 year ever. The second largest was 35 in 2016. This is the third ICBM that they apparently have tested this year. There haven't been any tests like this since 2017. Kim Jong-un had scaled back his provocations because of President Trump's personal diplomacy. It wasn't working perfectly, and maybe Kim was moving away from that under Trump. But there's been no North Korea policy at all under Joe Biden. Joe Biden has named a part-time North Korea envoy, who's also ambassador to Indonesia. I think the North Koreans feel insulted. They feel slighted. They see a weak president, and they're trying to get their concessions.
So Japan is a Western economy, and they, of course, after World War II, were forced to get rid of their army for all intents and purposes. Where does that stand now? And how much of a responsibility do we have if something happened between North Carolina and Japan?
Well, Japan is under the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Japan is a close ally. But I mean, there's a growing movement in Japan that it has to amend its constitution so it can have a modern army that can defend itself and attack enemies. It has taken some liberties in interpreting the constitution in which its defensive forces could be deployed outside of Japan. But I think Japan is moving in the direction where it has to have a strong and modern army, not just to stand up to North Koreans, but because of the threat from China.
I said North Carolina.
Yeah,
North Carolina. You got to watch North Carolina. That's a swing state. They're going on the attack.
Yeah, watch out.
Clearly, North Korea. So, Fred, you've been following what's going on in the world. We haven't talked to you in a little while. What should we be paying attention to that really should matter to Americans?
Well, I'm very concerned about what's going on in Ukraine. I'm very concerned when a megalomaniac talks about using nuclear weapons. But we know about that. I'm also watching Iran very closely. I don't know whether these protests are going to succeed or not. I hope they do. There were huge protests in 2009. The Iranian government, as you know, suppressed them. It worries me right now that Iran is trying to strike a deal with the United States. With these prisoners who were released, looks like we're going to make a huge payment to Iran, which basically amounts to ransom. I think Iran might be in a dealing mode right now to distract the world from these protests, and I hope the Biden administration doesn't take the bait.
All right, Fred Fleitz, great insights as always. Really appreciate your being with us today.
Good to be here.
No crooked establishment.
None of that twisting the truth. No talking down to me.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
I trust Newsmax.
Newsmax.
They don't tell me how to think. They let
me decide.
Newsmax.
Real news
For real people.